What's up, and welcome to episode 1 of the Fantasy Football Fanatics podcast as part of the Grey Wolf Entertainment Network. My name is Fitzy, and I'm joined down the line by Uncle G, the man who goes by Madman, Mr. Matt Grace. What is going on, sir?
Not much, Fitzy. We're obviously footy season's done and dusted for both of us now with our teams out, but we're on to a big season of NFL. It's exciting. It's back, and it was a late Sunday night, Monday morning for myself, trying to get as much in as possible. So I'm very excited for this new show, though. Bit of a tongue twister, the heading, but you can just call us Triple F, I suppose. We go by that.
That's right. Maybe not always, but no, I love it. Of course, yeah, you would have seen our faces on Grey Wolf footy through the AFL season, but we now switch jerseys, don't we, Gracie, to NFL. And this particular show has been rumoured for quite a while, and we're finally getting around to doing it, which is really exciting. It's a little bit late, a little bit close to week 2, but I guess officially this is our week 1 edition. But before we jump into the games and run through some positions, Gracie, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and how much you love the NFL and who you support?
Yeah, so obviously, as you said, everyone's seen us on the footy podcasts, and I think I got into NFL from you, Fitzy, mainly just doing fantasy. I think that's how I got right into it. I used to watch a bit of it, mainly Patriots. I'm a diehard, I guess you say, Patriots fan, but I'm just a lover of NFL in general. As people can probably see, I'm wearing a Bears jersey. I've got a few different team jerseys like yourself, Fitzy. So, but no, I'm definitely a Patriots man through and through, so hopefully no one hates me for that. But no, it's getting more into it with doing fantasy, and I think that's what you do with sports these days. Is you get it right into a sport, you got that connection through fantasy football with your mates, and trying to be competitive. So, but it's exciting that this time of year it's obviously warming up for us in Australia, and we're right into those late nights watching the games and obviously watching the Super Bowl once we get there.
Yeah, it's a very good point, especially in Australia, as you sort of alluded to. Very early Monday morning starts to check the scores and be disappointed when players are injured and whatnot, which is always a bit of fun. And especially this time of year where like with our daylight savings kicking in, the games are sort of starting early. So by the time you wake up, you've sort of got a half of football in the bag and you can kind of watch the end and see your players are going. But as you sort of mentioned, I probably did get you started on the fantasy football side. I've been doing it. My first season was 2012. And I remember the exact reason that you said, just as a way to get into the sport. I remember my first season, I joined a random group, drafted Ray Rice in the first round, Tony Romo a bit later on. Some of these names that are long gone, and won my first season of fantasy football, which is pretty cool. But followed the Ravens, diehard Ravens fan, and it hasn't been a great start to the season for us, but plenty of injuries. Good God, a lot of ACLs coming out of the Ravens camp, but hopefully we can pick it up as the season unwinds. But how about, Gracie, we sort of unwrap what this show is all about? Of course, Fantasy Football Fanatics. It's targeted towards fantasy football, but we will talk a bit of just general NFL news because we love it. But what we're going to do is we're going to break down the show into positions to sort of start with. We're going to fill it out and see how we go, but we're going to run through quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. So talk about studs and duds from the week, maybe some injuries that have popped up, what we're doing, who we're looking for on the waiver wire, who we're looking for to bounce back. But we're going to talk about some defense and special teams streaming options as well. And as I just said, we'll go over some waiver wire options for the week. And this week's a little bit tricky because we've started a bit late. It'll probably be a few guys that have already been picked up, but there's a couple little gems in there that I wouldn't mind picking up just with some injury situations and I suppose some backfield situations becoming more clearer with who backups are. But how'd your team go very quickly before we jump in, Gracie, for the week?
Yeah, I had some all right players, but I did lose, unfortunately. I lost by, I think, about 20 points in the end. So I had the Ravens defense, didn't quite hold up for me, but and then just had a couple of disappointing players. But my man Camaro, who we'll talk about, Fitzy, starred for me again, and a quarterback who I took a punt on, did quite well, which we'll get stuck into. But I lost week 1 for Lights Camaro action. So what about yourself?
Yeah, I came second as well. I'm not going to go there. A few very underperforming players, but you'll find out that Gracie and I get very competitive, and we have a league full of some friends from our sort of local town, and we'll talk about that and joke about it as we go through. But how about we start working through some positions, Gracie? Let's kick it off with the quarterbacks and the studs for the week, and it starts off with none other than two of the hottest picks of the year, dude, Kyla Murray and Patrick Mahomes. Both just put on a show, led their teams to victory, and I guess it's kind of that draft strategy is you sort of either pick a quarterback early or you wait, but these guys put on a show to start the season off.
Oh, it was unreal. And, Mahomes did it from, coming from behind. They were down early by a little bit. So he fought back and dominated. I suppose the big key for these two Fitzy is they do have a lot of rushing yards and do get in for rushing touchdowns as well. So that's a huge bonus if you've picked them up. So I did have Kyler Murray ready to go to pick, and unfortunately I missed out on him in our draft. So I feel like it was similar to what you said is you go, you get a Kyler Murray or Mahomes, or you just wait it out and see who's left at the end. This year, 100% bet, someone like a Tom Brady was probably not drafted in your league. So, and he had a pretty good week one. So, but yeah, very, very good start for Murray and Mahomes, Fitzy, that's for sure.
Yeah, and the guy you want to talk about, I know who it is. It's Jalen Hurts. He had a huge week one, led the Philadelphia to a huge win against Atlanta that sort of came out of nowhere in a way. He had 3 touchdowns thrown, but I know you were on him early in the preseason for a big year, and he finished last year off really strongly and sort of picked off where he left off last year.
Yeah, his last 4 weeks last year were quite huge. I think he even had a 37-point game in there somewhere. So, which is massive for a quarterback. Yep. Standard for someone like a Mahomes, though, obviously. But no, Hurts, Fitzy, I'm putting it out there. He'll be, I reckon, a top 5 or 10 quarterback for this season. I think and we'll get stuck into the weapons he's got on his offense as well. But he's another guy that uses his legs as well. So I think he went for 60-odd rushing yards as well. So that helped his score too. So I was very happy with that pick. As I said, missed out on Murray, but went all in on Jalen Hurts, Fitzy, and week one he's come up with the goods for me. So I'm very happy with that selection so far. So I suppose the next one getting stuck onto Fitzy's it was massive question marks is Jameis Winston. There I don't know what your thoughts are on him.
What a game, hey. He went for 148 yards through the air, but 5 touchdowns, and one of them to your boy, Alvin Camaro. Like, there were a lot of question marks around the Saints offense, particularly as a Camaro owner, because you relied on those Drew Brees dumps over the top. But Winston just came out and just went to town. And look, here's the thing, though. Can he build on that? 148 yards is not a lot of offense coming from a quarterback. He loves to throw it downfield. We know what he did at Tampa Bay. I think he was like a top 5 quarterback in 2019, I reckon, just before Fitzmagic came over and sort of took the show. But they made Green Bay look like a team of amateurs. And look, I may have a few things to say on Jameis Winston later in the show, but you couldn't be happy with that as a Saints fan.
Oh, you'd be stoked, and we'll get stuck in. You've still got some weapons to come back in to that offense as well. So look out for Winston there. I guess the thing for me for Winston is you've got to you ride the highs, and you've definitely got to ride the lows. So because he can definitely produce those shockers. But 5 touchdowns, good start. You couldn't have asked for a better start. As your debut for the Saints, and him and Kamara, like he went to Kamara quite a lot, even just on those short wide throws, and Kamara, we'll get stuck into him shortly, but yeah, it's good first week, and as you said, they made Green Bay look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. So very interesting to see how it moves in to week 2 and further on for Winston.
Yeah, and he did find Juwan Jones a couple of times, the tight end, for a few touchdowns. We know the Saints love to use their tight ends going back to the Jimmy Graham days, so watch how that sort of plays out. But a couple of names I want to throw at you here, Gracie. And just for the record, we are using standard scoring formats. We're not a PPR league, so we will just talk standard scoring. 3 guys that found new homes in the offseason, those are Jared Goff, Tyrod Taylor now as the starter at Houston, and Matt Stafford all had good starts. Of course, Goff didn't get the win, but man, he lit up the fantasy world in a sense, and he scored 28.92 points, which is very handy. And I was just going to point this to you. These 3 guys are potentially sitting on the waiver wire. Are any of them worth a pickup, or do you sort of play it out and just sort of wait and see?
I reckon you'd be, looking at them each week and just checking their matchups more than anything. Like, I watched Stafford's game, and he was unreal. Great game, and his first, like they obviously took the ball first, and his first play was, straight pass, unreal. So I'm
Yep.
looking forward to, there's talks that he's definitely in the MVP candidate, especially with the weapons he's got at his disposal as well. So out of those three, I think if you're going to pick one, I think I'd pick Stafford at the moment. He's been in the league for I think 12 years, and he's just proved it on the weekend that he's that MVP caliber, and we'll just wait and see. But it's definitely an upside for the Rams, that's for sure.
I like it. I reckon Matt Stafford's been disrespected many years in fantasy football. He's had some good weapons in the past, but how about Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Deshaun Jackson they added to their offense too, don't forget. He's still got Tyler Higbee there at tight end. Like, I think he could be right up there, and Sean McVay is one of the best coaches in the league. So watch this space for Matt Stafford. But let's keep moving through, Gracie. A few duds for the week and a few surprise names popped up in this category. One of them is unfortunately my quarterback. Not worried too much just yet, but let's start with Aaron Rodgers. Didn't even crack 2 points in that game we mentioned earlier against the Saints. 133 yards, 0 touchdowns, and I wrote a note next to his name that he sucked. That's probably the worst game he's ever played.
Oh, it wasn't just him, though. It was the whole Green Bay team and even their defense. And, they just didn't give any room for him to, even Aaron Jones, to get through and get running yards. So it was just an all-round great performance from a Saints defense who probably we didn't think would be that good. So, Green Bay, they've got questions to ask Fitzy there. They've got an MVP on this as their quarterback, and, he's in the, I guess, getting towards the twilight end of his career, and he's chasing that inevitable Super Bowl ring, I suppose. And he definitely, as you said, he definitely sucked on the weekend. So
that's all I had to his name.
We'll see how he goes week 2. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is good enough that we know he'll bounce back, and he can bounce back with a big bang. So, unfortunately, if you had him in fantasy, I mean, you'd be silly if he was on your waiver wire in one of your leagues, I think. So, but keep an eye out. I reckon he'll bounce back.
Oh, surely he can't get any worse than that. And of course, that was the roll-on effect for Devante Adams and Robert Tonyan as well, who barely even got going. But here's a theory for you, and I read this on Twitter. Obviously, there was all the the spat between Aaron Rodgers and ownership. He was going to get traded at one point, then he wasn't. Is there any chance this is a little bit of an FU to the organization just to come out and completely crap the bed?
Maybe it could be, because he didn't look all that interested in. I didn't see the whole game, but watched parts of it. But he definitely looked a bit disinterested, especially early in the game. Just didn't look as energetic, and being a quarterback, you're the leader of that offense, so. You'll see guys that might be struggling a little bit. You might see a Mahomes who starts off a bit slow in a game, but you'll always see him pumping up his offense, and once he gets a good pass off, you see him celebrating and running down the field. So there wasn't much of that from Aaron Rodgers on the weekend, but I don't think there was much of it from the whole Green Bay team, unfortunately. So, but I don't know. It's an interesting point. It's something that will develop, I think, over the coming weeks, that's for sure.
Yeah, and look, it all comes down to the weapons that they've got at Green Bay. I mean, they're essentially the same team as they were last year. Randall Cobb's back in town. Like, they're a very strong offense, and they always will be. So, look, maybe it could be a buy low option if you're really keen to try and steal Aaron Rodgers, because he still has that top 10 potential. But let's run through a few more names here, Gracie. Justin Herbert was the guy that I picked up. I'm still tipping him for a big season. He scored a measly 13 points. Didn't find the end zone, but they did get the win over Washington, and the game script probably just wasn't there. It was a very low-scoring game. It was sort of played on the ground quite a bit. Still had 337 yards, but out of all the quarterbacks this week, other than probably Big Ben and Baker Mayfield, like, there wasn't too many disappointments, I didn't think. So I had to throw Justin Herbert out there, putting him on notice for my team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one to keep an eye out on Fitzy as well is Fields from the Bears. He got a couple of goes and got a rushing touchdown himself. So he's getting in the action early, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see him as the number one quarterback in the next couple of weeks myself. So he's got massive potential with his legs, and he's got a great throwing arm. So I've stashed him on the bench. I got in early because I know he's going to be a hot property. I know in our league, the boys don't muck around when it comes to the waiver wire. So as I've already found out this week. So,
No.
But yeah, no, it's some exciting players, I suppose. And number one draft pick Fitzy was a bit probably not up to standard. You got Mac Jones from the Patriots. He was okay. He wasn't superstarish, but we'll see. It's only week one, and we usually find that you get a couple of bolters early on, and then they sort of dwindle out towards the end of the season. So
that's true.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah, that's true. And you can think of many of those from years gone by. Look up, was it Kevin Ogletree, that game for Dallas in about 2013? He had like 3 touchdowns a week one and didn't do anything the rest of the season. So definitely hold on to your number one waiver position. That's probably the advice I'd give this week. I don't think, even with the situation with the 49ers, I don't think there's anyone worth burning a number one waiver on, but we'll talk about that a bit later on. Before we keep going here, just a couple of names I wanted to throw around, Gracie. Matt Ryan, he crapped the bed as well. Not for him in particular, but more for his offense. I think that Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts were both very ineffective in that game. We'll talk about them shortly as well, but they were absolutely putrid against the Eagles. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Fitz magic, he's out for a few months. And it's not looking good. I mean, he's the one who I was very tempted to take a late round flyer on, but he's going to be out for a while now. And Taylor Heinicke comes in and hopefully can do something at Washington offense, because other than Antonio Gibson, they're looking pretty thin.
Oh yeah. They're definitely. I think their defense will win a lot of games for them this year. So, but there is reports that the Fitzpatrick show might be out for a bit longer than the 6 to 8 weeks, Fitzy. So that was reported late today that there's a few question marks there, but it's a big blow for him, and you just hope he gets back, because we know what he can do on an NFL field. So.
Man, full disclosure, he's probably my favorite player. Watching him sling bombs down the field in when he was at the Buccaneers a couple of seasons ago, and he walked out with the sunglasses on, remember, without the shirt, and good times. What a character. But hey, let's keep moving through. We've got some running backs to talk about. And the first guy that I was all over this preseason is Joe Mixon. He came out and made a statement, 29 carries for 127 yards and a touchdown. He had too much hate this preseason, Gracie. I'm just putting that out there. I think he did go off during the game at one point, but came straight back out. I mean, the Bengals have got to score somehow. I mean, Joe's going to throw the ball a lot, but I really think Mixon can show that, he's a top 5, top 10 running back.
Oh, absolutely. He's 29 carries, massive usage for especially week one. I think he's always been thereabouts. I think he's, as you said, he's been definitely this preseason, but I think most seasons he's been sort of pegged back from those top echelon running backs, like we always talk about, the Camaras, the Barkleys, I guess Gurley's in years gone past, Melvin Gordon's, those sort of guys. But Mixon's sort of just gone under the radar a little bit, in my opinion. So as he showed on the weekend, he probably got his team over the line and was 29 carries, able to move the ball forward for your team's a huge advantage. They'll be dangerous this year, I think, the Bengals. So they've got some good weapons on offense, and obviously Burrow's back in there. Like it's exciting.
It is,
for Bengals fans. So, but no, he's definitely one that if you picked him, you'd be very, very happy with his start, and hopefully he can keep it going.
I certainly am. In a league where you'd agree, Gracie, that they're trending more towards running backs by committee in a lot of situations, he's probably one true 3-down back, really, with Giovanni Bernard moving over to the Buccaneers as well. Like he's just on the field whenever he's healthy. So I'm looking for a big season out of him. But one guy that I'm a little bit scared of and could be even better than he was a few years ago is Christian McCaffrey. He scored a lazy 18.7 points with 21 carries, 98 yards, and 9 receptions for 89. That's a huge day in PPR leagues, but he didn't even find the end zone, and he still scored almost 20 points. They snuck over the line against the Jets, but that is scary.
Oh, it's super scary. We know he was a bit injury plagued last year, and then the year before he was just no one could get near him. And I think Tom Harden might have had him in our league, Fitzy. I'm pretty sure he got close to winning the league just from having McCaffrey. So, he's the guy that can score you 40 points more than once in a season. We saw Camaro do it last year, have that big game. But McCaffrey, to me, is probably the only one that can do it on a consistent basis, because he just gets so much usage with carries and receptions. So you wouldn't be too concerned that he didn't get in the end zone on the weekend, I don't think. So
you'd be very happy.
And sort of seeing some highlights from that game. It was a very scrappy game. So, when they get a game that it's on a bit more on their terms, I think you'll find McCaffrey will get a bit more loose. and definitely find that end zone. He'll definitely get a lot more chances. That's for
Yeah.
sure in week 2. So.
For your number 1 draft pick, mind you. But let's keep moving through this. One guy I wanted to throw on there, David Montgomery. He was handy. Probably a little disrespected again during the draft where he was getting picked up, but he had a huge effort against the Rams. They went down, but 16 carries for 108 yards and 1 touchdown. I actually think he passed the eye test and possibly was the pick of the running backs purely just on how good he looked.
Oh, absolutely. For mine watching a fair bit of that game that they were in trouble early against the Rams, and he just was able to plow through, get some first downs, got in the end zone. He just looked unreal, and I think he'll be he's like a bit like Joe Mixon. He'll get majority of the snaps and the offense in that team. So another one that if you picked him, you'd be very, very happy with week 1, and definitely plenty to build on. And that's he scored that in a loss. Like imagine, they get a good win, good comfortable win. Very exciting.
I think he can keep yards per carry total up because he's a very crafty running back. And Tyreke Hill's out as well. He's on the IR, I'm pretty sure, for a little while. So he's got every chance to just be the workhorse back in that team. But let's talk Detroit Lions, Gracie. They're often a wasteland for fantasy, especially for running backs. But Jamal Williams and Deandre Swift both had over 100 yards from scrimmage and both found the end zone. Deandre Swift was one that probably, again, disrespected during preseason, during training camp. He was injured at one point. I think it was the hamstring he was carrying in. But I'll tell you what, both of these guys look like they're worth rostering. And I see you make a point there, maybe the best duo in the NFL. And look, I'm making a big call that you could be right.
Yeah, I mean, they just looked unreal, didn't they? They shared the workload and both got in the end zone. Like I think if you've got 2 threats like that in your offense that are that good, I think you're going to use them every week and use them immensely a lot.
Yeah.
So, they're going to chew up, probably 75 to 80% of the offense there. So I think the only thing that will stop them will be an injury. So this game was a bit of a shootout, being 41-33. As you said, they lost, but it's a decent effort in a losing team that their offense was, I guess, on the park just as much as their defense. So it's exciting times at Detroit, and I suppose we're just it's week 1, we know, but as you said, I'm calling them they could be the best duo, 1-2 punch in the NFL. So
I love it.
Exciting times for them.
Dude, we need some early calls, and that's an early one, and I really like it. Both with flex value, and I put DeAndre Swift at RB2, and you think that's probably where he fits in. But we need to get on to the situation at San Francisco. Of course, Raheem Mostert, as is tradition, got injured in the first game of the season. That opened up the door for Elijah Mitchell. He had an awesome game, 19 carries, 104 yards, and a touchdown. But Trey Sermon was a scratch for the game. Jermichael Hasty got a few touches, and Jeff Wilson is on the IR. And look, in years gone by, we have seen the 49ers somewhat successfully use a running back by committee. Is Mitchell the clear-cut back here, or are you thinking that Sermon could pop up maybe mid-season and take that job?
It was hard because Sermon, his average draft position was quite high in mock drafts and even people doing their fantasy drafts. So he went early in ours, and then obviously was a healthy scratch. So I unfortunately had Raheem Mostert Fitzy, and he scored me a whole 2 points. So that was that's what started the rot for my side this week. But I was number 4 on the waiver list, and I didn't get Elijah Mitchell, so I was a bit crappy on that. But that's all right. But I think you got to be careful. I think as you said, we've seen the committee in the past. So when Jeff Wilson comes back, it's quite likely that by then that Sermon could be the number 1 back, and Mitchell might not be getting anything. So it's just a wait and see. And it's very hard with that 49ers offense to know who's going to be the standout each week, I suppose. But look, he's proved a good week 1, and it'd be very hard if they didn't play Sermon this week in week 2. So look, you'd probably start him at a flex if you had to. I would probably even, if you don't need to start him at flex, I'd just hold him on your bench for the moment, because he could, if a Mitchell has 2 or 3 or 4 games of amazing scoring, well, then you're going to sell him high, aren't you? Because it's most likely that once Jeff Wilson's back, that the committee will form probably a bit more, and you
Yeah.
might find that he'll drop off a little bit. That's just, I guess, my thoughts on him.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Like I said, they have made the running back by committee work, but I actually think Jeff Wilson is worth a stash if you've got an IR spot, because we've seen him in the past be very effective, a bit like Mostert. They're very effective from their touches, the 49ers running backs. They obviously draft a certain type. So I'd be throwing not a waiver wire, I'd be throwing a free agent line out to Jeff Wilson and whack him on your IR if you have the spot. But another running back situation, Gracie, that's got even more clouded through the week is the Ravens. My poor Ravens losing players to ACLs left, right, and center. Of course, Gus the Bus went down with an ACL. They've scrambled to pick up Le'Veon Bell. They scrambled to claim Latavius Murray, and they've signed Devonta Freeman to the practice squad. It's an absolute mess. But Tyson Williams, he had a fairly solid outing. He had, what do we got here, 9 carries for 65 yards and 1 touchdown. But the problem was, about after halftime, the game script kind of changed. Latavius Murray came into the game. We all know Lamar Jackson is probably the best running back on the Ravens. Look, are you buying into any of this, or are you just going to avoid it altogether?
Oh, it's hard. I've picked him up in one of the other leagues that I just jumped into, just as a more of a flex bench cover. It's hard. As you said, you got Lamar Jackson, who's probably the best, or not probably, is the best running back on the Ravens have got. But Murray just offers that something else, doesn't he? He's got that experience, and he's performed quite well in previous years. So I don't know. He's going to have the opportunity to shine, I think. But I think, as you said, when game scripts change, I think you'll find Lamar will probably run a bit more. And, when he's, needs to throw, he'll throw. So it's hard. It'll be 1 week, like you said, this week he's scored 15.4 fantasy points. And next week it could quite easily be 4.5 fantasy points. Like, it's just very, very hard. I think if, Edwards was still the number 1, I think you'd be no problems with having him as your like RB2 even. I think you'd be fine there. But I don't know. It's a tough one. I think it's just a wait and see on Williams. I wouldn't be, as you said, going out of your way to lose your number 1 waiver wire spot to get him, just purely because of the situation at the Ravens. And Lamar Jackson and Murray. If Murray starts, performing quite well, he could quite easily, push Williams down the pecking order. So
the problem with Murray, and as we saw with Alvin Kamara at the Saints, Murray does vulture the touchdowns quite a bit because he's a big body. He gets through. So I don't know. Look, I mean, you got to look back to last season. Mark Ingram had some value with the Ravens. In the past, that's kind of been how it is with Lamar Jackson. Then there's going to be games where Lamar throws it 15 times and he has 20 rushes. Like, it's very hard to pick which Ravens running back to start. But of course, they're all worth rostering and maybe just find out how that situation plays out. And we'll see how we go. And good luck for the Ravens. I'm a bit nervous about the season, but what do you do? But let's keep moving through, Gracie. One name I'm going to throw at you that we just have pulled out of nowhere, really. Mark Ingram. He was almost didn't look like the Mark Ingram of old from the Saints days, but man, he had 26 carries, 85 yards, and 1 touchdown. He might be the back to own in Houston, of course. David Johnson has gone from the number 1 fantasy running back to the number 3 on that roster. And of course, they added Phillip Lindsay. All 3 of those backs found the end zone. But I reckon if Mark Ingram's sitting in your free agent list right now, why not throw him in on the bench and just see how this plays out?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I see you picked him up in our league earlier today. So the only thing that concerns me with Ingram is his yards per carry. Obviously, 26 carries for 85 yards, but he's going to get that opportunity. It could quite easily turn that 26 carries into 120 yards, and then you're laughing and a couple of touchdowns. But he's going to get a lot of the goal line work. As you said, all 3 of them found the end zone. Phillip Lindsay's more your passing back. He'll get a lot of receptions, I think. And as you said, Johnson's a tough one. He might get 4 or 5 carries a game, but he's probably going to get the opportunity near the goal line as well. So I don't think it's going to be so much of a committee. I think it's whoever's on will be on in that game. So if you might find next week Ingram starts off very, very poor, so they'll throw Johnson in, and then all of a sudden Johnson gets a couple of good carries, then they might run with him. So I think it's a week by week sort of thing for Houston, but there's going to be plenty of usage with those running backs. Obviously, Deshaun Watson not there at quarterback for this season at this stage, so plenty of usage for the running backs there for mine, I think.
It's been one of those situations with Houston, not to go on about them for too much, but like David Johnson last year, he was startable every third week. Lamar Miller for the 2 years before that was the same. Like, it's really hard to find when you start those Houston guys. You put them on the bench, they score 20, throw them in your roster, and they score 5. So definitely a wait and see. Look, it might just take an injury to one of those guys to give Mark Ingram a more clearer role, but it's definitely worth sticking on the bench and waiting to see what happens. But got to talk about your boy, Gracie, before we move on to the Nuds. Alvin Kamara, that's what you snuck him in there. He had 20 carries, if you don't mind, on the weekend, which usually he sits around the sort of 12 to 15 mark, but he's used to all those dump offs and catches from Drew Brees. So he only had 3 receptions, but one of those was for a touchdown. It's going to be interesting. You have flagged here that, of course, he is the man until Michael Thomas returns, which is completely true. But, a different game plan maybe with Jameis Winston. But if he gets those carry numbers up, like, he could be the all-round running back that we know that he is.
Yeah, I watched this one for majority of it, and he wasn't gaining huge meters, but he looked like the Kamara of old. Just last season, just apart from his last game, he went bananas. But there was games last year where he looked like he was struggling a little bit, and we know what he's like, we know what he's capable of. So he just looked like the Kamara of old. He looked fit. New offense, new quarterback. It just looked like they're all energized and ready to go. So it's exciting times for Saints fans, and I'm excited to have Kamara as my RB1. So I'm excited. I'm hoping for a 53-point game, Fitzy, where he scores 6 touchdowns again. But we'll wait and see.
If he has a terrible game next week, I'm going to wear my Kamara jersey just to be a bit of a smart ass. But hey, let's get a few duds from the week. And no alarm bells here with any of these guys. And look, it is only at the end of week 1. We're not really getting too alarmed about anyone. We're not dropping anybody. But James Robinson's the first one. Very meager 5.4 points. Carlos Hyde took some work off him. He only ended up with 5 carries and 3 receptions. But Urban Meyer, people have said this guy is a high school coach or a college coach. He shouldn't be coaching NFL. He's already come out and said that we need to get James Robinson involved more. I don't know what else we can say about him. Get him in the game. Like Trevor Lawrence needed, he threw 3 picks, I'm pretty sure 3 interceptions. So he needed a few more yards on the ground. So hopefully it's going to turn around. But I mean, Robinson's no more than a flex play at this stage.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you. I think the game script also may have led to them needing to throw a bit more. And as you said, there was some interceptions as well, which hurt. But look, James Robinson, we know what he did last year, Fitzy, and he's just an absolute beast. So I agree. I think they need to get him more involved, and you got to get him carrying the ball. Like, 5 carries for 25 yards. That's pretty good yards per carry. So they definitely need to get him more involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll keep moving through a few of these. Nudgy Harris for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He only had 16 carries for 45 yards. They got up against the Bills in a pretty surprise win there, Gracie. But one thing is he had 100% of the Steelers' backfield share. And I'm often noting there to try and maybe buy low. And I know it's very hard to buy low after week 1. Like, no one's really looking to get rid of anybody. But if that trend continues and say he comes in week 2, maybe has a similar kind of usage, I'm going to throw a few sort of overperforming running backs or maybe an RB2 and a wide receiver of some sort to try and package up, because it's all about usage in fantasy, and he's got a clear-cut role. I just hope that he can put it together.
So do I, Fitz. I've sneakily already thrown a trade the person's way who does have Nudgy Harris, because I know that he's the guy. He's the guy at Pittsburgh, and the Bills' defense are one of the best in the business. So even though the Steelers did get the win, but I think we'll find that in future 16 carries will be more like 110 yards for Harris, in my opinion, and maybe a touchdown or 2. So I totally agree, Fitzy. I think it's going to definitely be a trading war in the next couple of weeks in our league. I think for this guy. So especially with myself losing most at, I'm definitely going to try and wiggle a trade somehow to get Harris if I can.
Well, the thing is, if the Harris owner went RB with his first 2 picks or her first 2 picks, and they've got a strong RB1 and they've lost their first couple of games, you might be able to throw a trade in there to try and sort of pry Harris off their hands, but, see what happens there. But 2 guys I want to just quickly mention here, Gracie. Funnily enough, my 2 starting running backs in a different league, Zeke Elliott and Saquon Barkley. Zeke probably had his toughest matchup in terms of defenses against the Bucs for the season. Only the 11 carries. He didn't do too much with it. He almost got in the end zone towards the end of the game. But Saquon Barkley is the one I just want to quickly mention. I feel he's going to be a very slow burn. He didn't even play 50% of the snaps on the weekend. So it might be worth picking up Devontae Booker just to see what happens in that situation, because he's definitely not getting rushed back.
No, and they're going to limit him. He's a franchise running back, Barkley, and he's got the similar traits to a McCaffrey. He can play the receiving game as well. So, yeah, they're going to take it easy with Barkley. And, he was available with my first pick, and I love Saquon Barkley, absolutely unreal. But coming back from an ACL, it's a big ask to perform straight out of the block. So, as you said, slow burn, and whoever's got him, if he has a couple of low-performing weeks, you could always try and buy low on him as well. Because I think by the time we get to, about halfway through the year, I think that's when he'll start finding his feet and get back to his best. So, as you said, Zeke, we know what Zeke does, so he'll be no problems for week 2, that's for sure.
I definitely agree. And was Adrian Peterson came back from the ACL and had an MVP year that sort of following season. So it could still happen. We'll just wait and see.
Yeah.
But hey, let's talk some wide receivers, Grace. There's a few names here I'm going to throw at you, and a few we'll just sort of skip over. But Tyreke Hill, I know you love him. We don't have to go too far into his stats. 11 receptions, 197 yards, as you do. 1 touchdown, 15 targets was massive. He's going to be the number 1 wide receiver this year, Gracie. Change my mind.
Oh, I don't think I can, Fitzy. I think, there's a lot of guys they're going to have big games, but this guy's one that can have a 30, 40-point game quite easily just because of how quick he is, and Mahomes loves throwing long to him, especially the way the game went on the weekend was perfect Mahomes Hill game script that they love. So, 11 of 15, 197 yards. It's unreal. So it's he doesn't usually do it in week 1 though. That's the the surprising thing. So obviously had a good off season, and that Chiefs offense is looking very dangerous early on. Fitzy, obviously, hurting from that Super Bowl loss last year. So, but no, I think I agree with you on this one. I think he'll be going close to being the number 1 wide receiver for the year.
Yeah, look out. And here's 2 guys that I feel are very much disrespected in drafts. Amari Cooper in particular, he seems to get disrespected anyway. And CD Lamb, they went down to the Buccaneers, of course, but both of them had huge games. Cooper had 2 touchdowns on 16 targets, 139 yards, and CD Lamb looked amazing. He started the game really well, 15 targets for a touchdown as well. Dak is back, and I think that's huge. I read a stat when Dak was playing last season, the first few games that he played, Amari Cooper was massive, and I think these guys went too far down in drafts. I reckon that Cooper could have pushed late 2nd, early 3rd round, really, with that kind of usage and the talent that he's got. But Dak really is the key to making the Cowboys tick on offense.
Oh, 100%. If he's up and firing like he was on Thursday Night Football, then these 2 blokes are guys that you definitely want to have on your side, and if you wouldn't have, if you had them both in the same team, you probably it's a tough one. Do you play them both in the same week, or because they could quite easily do the opposite? But no, I'm picking these 2 to have a massive year. CD Lamb was I'm pretty sure it was a high draft pick as well from memory. So no, very exciting times if you're a Dallas fan, and hopefully for their sake that they can win a few more games this year. These 2 guys will be pivotal in making that happen.
That's it. And we've already spoken about the 49ers offense, Gracie. Debo Samuel came out. Brandon Ayuk was nowhere to be seen on offense for some reason. So Debo ate all of those targets, all 12 of them. He finished with 9 receptions, 189 yards, and a touchdown. He's got value going forward. I'm putting him at least at a flex, if not WR2. I think, look, George Kittle's attracting a lot of attention from the defense. One of those receivers is going to catch a lot of passes. They do have a tendency to score high. Debo Samuel could have been a bit undervalued going into draft day.
He could be. Ayuk, I think they did come out and say he had a hamstring strain, so he didn't play at all. So interesting to see, how that affects him moving forward, whether he, doesn't play much this week, and you've got Debo Samuel there again. But last year, I had him last year, Fitzy, on the bench, and he was more injured than he played. But in the games that he played, he was targeted a lot, and he has big plays, as you can see, nine receptions for 189 yards. So when they go to him big. So I like the call it, WR2 or a flex. But definitely, if you've got 2 good wide receivers and he's your flex, you're going to go a long way this fantasy season as long as he stays healthy.
Yep, big call there, and I agree with you. And another one that maybe was disrespected a bit on draft day, and fair enough too, was Corey Davis. He had a really good debut with the Jets. I mean, Zach Wilson has to pass the ball to someone. He finished with 97 yards, a couple of touchdowns, 7 targets, and he caught 5 of them. But, I mean, he was very underwhelming over the years in Tennessee. I mean, look, sometimes these Jets wide receivers do pop up and have a little bit of value. I mean, I'd say he's probably sitting on the waiver wire if it hasn't gone through, but you've got to roster this guy if he's sitting there.
Oh, 100%. He's got big plays in him at Fitzy, and that they're going to use him. He'd have to be the number one receiver on that team, I think, in my opinion. But yeah, well, as you said, if he's on your waiver wire, definitely stash him on your bench. That's for sure. So
yeah,
only seven targets, but 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. Very, very nice stats.
Yeah, definitely. And here's 3 names I'm throwing at you. 3 veterans, DeAndre Hopkins, Adam Thielen, and Antonio Brown. Hopkins and Thielen almost turned back the clock a little bit. They found the end zone twice themselves. I reckon Thielen and Hopkins will both be top 10. Thielen's the one that I think last year, he was out week 1. I can't remember if it was a hammy or something like that. He couldn't quite get the season going, but I really like him as a smoky for a top 10 finish. But I want your opinion on Antonio Brown, Gracie. We all know what he can do. He found the end zone, caught 5 of 7 targets, 121 yards. But I've read that he's been living with Tom Brady over the offseason. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Tampa Bay. But out of those 3, like, who are you most excited about this season?
Oh, it's Antonio Brown for sure. We know what he's done in the past, and he's got that big plays in him. As we saw, 5 receptions for 121 yards. So I'm the same as you. I'm all over Antonio Brown, and he could be the one that takes him to the Super Bowl again this year with him and Brady, their connection, as well as Brady and Gronk, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But Antonio Brown, if you picked him up, and he would have gone fairly late in most drafts as well. So be very, very happy with his first game, and hopefully he can continue that moving forward. But as you said, a lot of mouths to feed, Fitzy, and we'll obviously talk about another Buccaneers wide receiver shortly. But exciting times if you're an Antonio Brown owner.
Yeah, definitely. And to go from the veterans to the rookies, and we saw some good rookies come through, like your Justin Jefferson's last year. And how about Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith? All played really well in week 1. They all found the end zone. Like, just very serviceable, I think, is the word to use there, Gracie. Of course, like, usually these rookies take some time to sort of work their way into the season, especially when they've all got fairly young quarterbacks. But I'm huge on Jalen Waddle this year. I think he's the real deal. I think Devonta Smith isn't far away, but Jamar Chase just came out and he looked like he's going to be the receiver to own out of all those Bengals wideouts.
Oh, absolutely. The Bengals wideouts, there's some good options there, but I agree with you. I think Chase is the number one guy, and he's going to have a big year. Him and Joe Mixon are going to be very pivotal in them winning games this year. But I'm all on Devonta Smith, Fitzy. I took him early. I don't know if I told you I had Thomas lined up ready to go to put him on my IR, but I went Devonta Smith instead, and you ended up nabbing Michael Thomas on me. So, but yeah, I'm very high on this guy, especially with Jalen Hurts there as well. I reckon Devonta Smith could quite easily finish top 10 wide receiver for mine this year. I'm making the call, and it's exciting. He's got his electric pace. He's athletic. It's good to watch.
Yeah, that's it. And you've got like Zach Ertz is out, like Dallas got it. It's going to take up some targets, but he really is the man there. And I know Miles Sanders catches passes, but it's a good call. I love it. And we've got to throw a few big calls out early in the show to get ourselves on the map. But before we keep moving on, let's talk about a few duds for the week. And one you sort of alluded to there before, Gracie, Mike Evans, 2.4 standard points. He only had the 6 targets. He caught 3 of them. I feel as though Mike Evans is going to go back to the Mike Evans of 3 or 4 years ago where he was just boom or bust. I just like we sort of said, there's so many mouths to feed at Tampa Bay. They've got a fairly solid running game there when Ronald Jones doesn't fumble the ball. But Rob Gronkowski is going to eat some targets. He's looking good. He had a couple of touchdowns. We'll talk about him shortly. But is Mike Evans not a weekly starter anymore? Here's the big question.
No, I don't think so. I think Gronk's had another, off season with Brady. I mean, they've had many off seasons together, but obviously coming back, he's fitter again.
Yep.
They're obviously hungry for another Super Bowl. Antonio Brown looks unreal fit, as you said. He's been living with Brady. They're Brady's top 2 targets for mine. Then you got Godwin in there as well. I think Mike Evans, as you said, is going to be boom or bust. I think it's going to be whoever's on the day. Like Mike Evans has to be on, I think, to steal from these other mouths in that offense. So, like I had Evans last year, but you didn't have the effect of what Antonio Brown did in week 1. So, I'm very concerned and he would have gone fairly high in drafts as well, Mike Evans, because of the year he did have last year. So that was always the question marks. If you got him late, like great. Like if he's your flex, I'm not too worried. But if he's your wide receiver 2, I'd be a little concerned. And people could come in and buy low. You could try and attempt to buy low on him, but is there enough potential there to make it a worthwhile buy low trade? That's the big question mark.
I mean, if you've got Mike Evans at flex, you went 0 RB, you'd be bloody laughing, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But well, Chris Godwin had 13 targets. He's the man across the front. So I don't know where Evans fits into that offense anymore. I just think, like I said, there's so many mouths to feed. But another veteran and one that switched teams this season was Julio Jones. He's now on the Titans. He was very underwhelming, and that's putting it very lightly there. Three catches. Yeah, it's true. Now, what I was going to ask you here, like he had a very underwhelming game. He had a run first team. Obviously, Derrick Henry actually wasn't even that good himself. Do you think it's just more the Titans offense just hasn't gotten it going just yet?
Yeah, I think so. I think don't want to get down on Julio too much just after 1 week. So I think we need a bit more of a sample size to see what this Titans offense is going to do. We know they're a massive run-heavy offense with Henry there, but as you said, even he struggled. So it was quite embarrassing loss for the Titans, in my opinion. They've been thereabouts for the past couple of years, and Tannehill's quite a respectable quarterback, and they just had nothing for him, unfortunately. So wait and see. I wouldn't be too concerned though.
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Julio. And, of course, there was an injury cloud around him before week 1, but A.J. Brown's going to take a lot of those targets. But, nothing to be panicked about now, but I'll be just sitting him on the bench for the time being. But the team that he left, Gracie, was the Atlanta Falcons. We've already quickly touched on Matt Ryan. Calvin Ridley was just awful. He was like my 3rd-round pick. He had 8 targets still, though, 5 catches, 51 yards. But I'm not going to talk too much about the Atlanta Falcons. I'm just going to put that down to Atlanta. WTF? What the hell?
Yeah, I agree. It's very unlike Atlanta, especially Matt Ryan and Ridley. But we'll just see what happens.
It's
with them. I was going to say, for my sake and a tight end we're going to talk about, I really hope they get it together.
Yeah, I know you went. Kyle Pitts is your man, but you're having a bad day when Cordero Patterson is just about outdoing Mike Davis, your starting running back. But no more hate for Atlanta. One guy I quickly want to touch on before we move on is Devante Adams, another guy who would have gone very early in drafts. Gracie, nothing to be too worried about here right now. Wouldn't have thought. It's just a product of Aaron Rodgers having probably his worst day.
Oh, I agree. I'm not too concerned. He's an elite talent, and it's another one of those, if they do it two or 3 weeks out of 4, I'd be very concerned. But he still had 7 targets. He still picked up 56 yards. Like if that's a low game for Devante, you'd be okay with it, especially the day Rodgers had. So no concerns for Devante.
Yeah. If he found the end zone, you'd probably take that. But again, I would assume that's going to be his lowest score for the whole season. But let's keep moving through here. We've got another position to go through, and that is the tight end. And the one guy, first cab off the rank here, Gracie, Darren Waller. I've put a big call in here. Is he above Travis Kelce? We know that John Gruden absolutely loves him. He had 19 targets on the weekend, 19. And Derek Carr ain't thrown it to anyone else. He found the end zone once, 10 receptions, 105 yards in that big win over Baltimore. My big call for the year is Darren Waller finishes tight end number 1.
That's a big call, Fitzy. I'm still going to stick with Kelce, in my opinion, but Waller's not far behind at all. So the way the game went on the weekend, they were looking for him. So as you said, 19 targets. I'd like to say just a couple more games for mine. Obviously, Kenyon Drake's gone there as well, so he's a passing back as well. So we'll just wait and see. But it's a very, very good start if you drafted Darren Waller, that's for sure. So I'd be very, very happy, especially that target share. It's unreal. But for mine, I think at the moment, after week 1, I'll still stick with Kelsey.
I'm just throwing the big calls out there, man, because that's what we do. We want to create a bit of another guy we've quickly touched on was Gronkowski. He had a very nice day, couple of touchdowns. He caught 8 of 8 targets, which is fantastic. No surprise with Tom Brady, 90 yards. And he's now put himself into that category of playing as a week-to-week tight end. If you've got one of these guys we're about to talk about, Robert Tonyan or Mark Andrews, he might be worth picking up if you're sitting on the waiver wire. Throw him in at tight end because I think Gronk Smash is going to have a big season.
Oh, I totally agree. They've built that chemistry back up, and he's obviously, as I said before, had another off season since technically retiring. But it's exciting times. For Bucks fans, they're in a good stead to go back to back. And if Gronk's up and about, then the Bucks are up and about. So it's good to see though. Gronk's been a fantasy superstar his whole career. Last year he started off slow, obviously, just getting back into it. And then I had him towards the end of the year. He actually performed very, very well. So he had those sort of, he got around that sort of 5 to 8 target mark and caught maybe 4 or 5 catches, had a touchdown for, 30 or 40 yards. That's respectable for a guy that's come back being out of the game. So, and then he comes out and does this week 1, which also destroyed my fantasy hopes of winning as well. So, but no, it's exciting times.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I read. Did he catch his 100th touchdown pass from Tom Brady or something like that during the game as well? So he's had
102 or 103 touchdowns in his career, and 100 have been from Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So.
How cool is that? And look, let's talk about another couple of guys that are just going to be consistent all season. TJ Hopkinson, who was my big pick for the season, he's going to be top 5. And your boy Travis Kelce as well. Both of these guys, want to quickly bring them up. They're just going to get that target share as well. We know what Kelce can do, but I reckon TJ Hopkinson can really take that step up. He had a good season last year, but with a pretty much non-existent receiver core for the Lions, I think he's a good pick for this year. But those guys plus your George Kittles probably make up your top 5, I would think, Gracie, at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. I think you got Waller, Gronk, Hopkinson, Kelce, and then Kittle in there as well. And and we'll talk to him about him very shortly. Fits even my boy Kyle Pitts. I was hoping he'd start off well and put himself in that conversation, being the most or the best tight end talent we've seen for a very, very long time to come out or come into the pros. So, but he was obviously a little disappointing, but. As you said, Atlanta were WTF. So
let's talk about them right now, man. We go to the tight end duds of the week. Kyle Pitts. I hate calling a rookie tight end a dud because we all know that rookie tight ends sort of don't really take off in their first season. But Kyle Pitts, of course, was a big chance to sort of buck that trend. He had 8 targets, only caught 4 of them for 31 yards. But I mean, you're holding because you would have picked him up, like you're sort of saying, round 5 or 6, 7 thereabouts. So you got to hold on at this point. But maybe you could plug the hole with a Gronkowski off the waiver wire, maybe just for a week or two while they sort their stuff out in Atlanta.
Yeah, I agree. I think once they get into a bit more of a rhythm in that offense, I think you'll find that Pitts will be very, very dominant tight end and go-to guy along with Ridley. So we'll no alarm bells just yet. Obviously, it's his first NFL game, so we'll let him have a bit more slack. So
let him go with that one. That's fair enough. But 2 guys I'll just bring up as duds before we move on. Mark Andrews was fairly ordinary. Lamar threw the ball 30 times, I'm pretty sure, thereabouts. He only had 5 targets, 3 receptions. Now, he was a huge presence in that offense a couple of years ago. He's been a very high pick the last couple of seasons in fantasy, but maybe a couple of alarm bells there for Mark Andrews. It's just you just don't know what Lamar's going to do. As a Lamar owner in fantasy in the years gone by and a Ravens fan, like the game script just changes so much. So you really need Andrews to find the end zone. And that's similar for another guy, Robert Tonyan, who was very solid last season, particularly in the back end of the year, connecting with Aaron Rodgers. But Rodgers was putrid, was what I wrote down here. He only had the 2 receptions for 8 yards. So 2 guys, look, we know what the tight end position's like, Gracie. Other than those first few guys, you're really relying on touchdown. So are you panicking on any of these guys just yet, or are you going to wait it out for a couple?
Oh, I agree with you on Andrews. I think it's very hard to pick a tight end in that Ravens offense, especially with the the running back situation with Lamar and Tyson and Murray. So we'll just wait and see. It's tough. On Robert Tonyan's, he was boom or bust last year a little bit. He was a bit more boom early, but he did bust in a few games. But it's hard, especially when the whole Packers team was as putrid as they were. Like, it's just, I think we need a couple more games. So we'll give them till week 3, I reckon.
All right. So in future shows, we're going to be a little bit more harsh on our tight ends. But like I've been in, what do they call it, tight end jail or whatever in years gone by. We just can't find one that works. And they always score when they're on your bench. But let's keep moving through here, Gracie. A couple of things that we like to throw at everyone each week is going to be some defensive special team streamers. Hopefully you can pick up off your waiver wire. I've got 3 I'm just going to throw out there that are worth picking up. A couple of these guys for a few weeks. Firstly is the Saints. We saw what they did to Aaron Rodgers. They've got Sam Darnold and the Panthers up. Of course, Christian McCaffrey is sitting on that offense, but I'm going to roll them out in a couple of leagues this week. Next one is the Cleveland Browns. Their schedule for the next few weeks is actually pretty nice, so I'm going to roll with them in a couple of leagues if you can pick them up. The last one is the Arizona Cardinals, more for the personnel, man. Like lots of buzz around this defense. Chandler Jones is fresh off 5 sacks against poor old Ryan Tannehill. And, of course, J.J. Watt's in town. They've got Minnesota, and then they've got Jacksonville. So a couple of guys there, if they're available on your waiver wire, throw them on your bench, chuck them in your lineup. And we're going to cover a few defenses each week because we've got to look after the DST, Gracie.
Absolutely, and I agree with all of those, Fitzy. There's a couple other streaming options. I think Washington's got a good matchup this week as well. Patriots have a good matchup too. So and Patriots, keep in mind, Fitzy, they got a lot of players back that opted out of the 2020 season. So they actually looked all right against the Dolphins. I think they scored 7 fantasy points. Only obviously just lost that game, but keep an eye out for the Patriots defense this week as well. Another one if they're available and you can't get one of the 3 that you've already mentioned.
Absolutely. And we'll roll through the second last section of the show. And I should have said off the top that what we're going to do at the end of every show is Gracie's going to give us a bold call of the week. And we've already thrown a few doozies in for this show. But before we get there, let's talk about a few waiver wire pickups. And of course, because we've released this show a little bit later in the week, there's a chance that these guys have already been picked up, but we'll cover them quickly anyway and a few extra points on top. But Elijah Mitchell was the first guy I had off the rank there, Gracie. As you mentioned, you missed out on him and you had the number 4 waiver wire priority. But Jeff Wilson, for me, is still a guy. If you can pick him up for free, throw him on your IR if you've got a spot there and just see what happens.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree there. And there's some good picks. I think Christian Kirk might still be available as well, Fitzy. So, good pick there. And Tony Jones Jr., watching that game, he did quite well in the opportunities he got as Kamara's backup. So it's a few nice pickups that you can get this week. But as you said earlier, in future we'll release these a little bit earlier so you can get high on or hot on those options.
Tell you what, a couple of these guys might still be on your waiver wire. Kenneth Gainwell, of course, for the Eagles. He found the end zone. He's the clear-cut back up to Miles Sanders, but I reckon he can form a role in that offense. Mark Ingram, of course, we've already mentioned. He's probably been picked up by me in your league. Tony Jones Jr. was the guy who's definitely come across as the clear backup. Latavius Murray's left at the Saints, so he's one just to keep on your roster, particularly if you're a Kamara owner. I'd be stashing him just in case. Christian Kirk, as you mentioned there, he's clearly going to have some work alongside DeAndre Hopkins. He scored a couple of touchdowns on the weekend. And lastly there, I've thrown the boy we spoke about right at the start, Jameis Winston. If you're looking for a quarterback, he's owned in almost 50% of ESPN leagues. But look, he could be anything this year. We've seen him finish close to top 5 there a couple of years ago in Tampa Bay. He really could be anything. But as you mentioned, Gracie, we'll get the shows out a little bit earlier just so we can give some advice on the waiver wire. But before we wrap up, you've got to give me this bold call because I haven't heard it yet. So I'm very interested to see. We've already ruffled some feathers on this show. You got no idea these Aussie guys trying to talk NFL. But throw us your bold call for week 2.
I'm gonna go with it that Aaron Rodgers scores less than 1.32 points.
Wow. Okay. Okay. All right. Just gonna leave that one right there.
I'm leaving that one right there. They play the Lions, so he shouldn't. He should have a field day, but that's my bold call is that Rodgers stinks it up again. So.
Love it. Are you expecting him to get injured or just be terrible?
Oh, well, probably terrible, but no, they should be all right against the Lions.
I love it. Well, that is definitely a bold call. And what way to kick off our first show then with the boldest of calls, Gracie. That was brilliant. But hey, thanks for joining me. It's been a bunch of fun. Guys, this is our first episode. We're going to be sort of chopping and changing a bit each week as this show sort of forms into what it is. But give us a follow on Facebook, the Fantasy Football Fanatics, part of the Grey Wolf Entertainment Network. Thank you, Gracie. Good luck to your team. Good luck to Alvin Kamara, of course. If he sucks, I'm going to be wearing my jersey next week. Don't you worry about that.
I might be MIA, missing in
Oh,
action
yeah.
if that happens. So.
Find another co-host. But hey, good luck to your teams. The other thing I'll quickly mention is if you've got any questions or anything you want us to sort of discuss on the show, hit us up online, Twitter. We'll be around. You'll be able to find us very quickly. Tune in on your favorite podcast network, of course. But until next week, all the best in fantasy, and we'll see you after week 2.
Yeah, my call to the end, Fitzy, is to our American mate, Jerry, who goes for the Titans. Tighten up.
That's a great line to end the show on. We'll see you next week.